How's it going, everyone? Today we're going to be going over some exercises and drills to bring some awareness for the elusive posteriorly tilted pelvis, or the tucked tailbone. It's a cue that we give to people all the time throughout various exercises, and it's a little bit difficult to achieve properly, and that's why we're going to be going over some drills and exercises to build some context around it and hopefully have that ability transfer over from one exercise to another, and then leading us all the way up to the most important exercises that it's required for in order to get the most out of them. So to start, we'll be on all fours, a quadruped position, and this is just going to be something that we do in order to understand the extremes of the movement. So the anteriorly tilted pelvis, it's going to be, I guess, what we would call the cow position if we're here. So it's going to be tilting that pelvis down, or tilting the pelvis forward, and that's going to be arching the back, and then the cat or camel, I guess, which is going to be tucking that tailbone all the way underneath. So between those two extremes, right, we're going to be tilting the pelvis forward and tilting the pelvis back. So if you give that a try, tucking is going to be creating that cat position. That's going to be that posteriorly tilted pelvis. And that, again, brings you some awareness between the two extremes. So from there, if I go onto a knees down sort of front plank position from here, now this one's going to be sort of a 2-for-1 because it's going to teach us how to tuck that tailbone and as well as get the most out of our front plank. So what'll be important here for the setup is that when I'm down on my elbows here, I keep my knees down, and as you can see, the elbows are under the shoulders and my knees are not too close to my hips because then my butt will be too far in the air, and it's not so far away that I'm almost lying flat. So it's at an angle here that kind of keeps my hips and shoulders at about the same height. And then as you can see, I'm tucking my toes underneath, or I'm curling my toes underneath, so that way when I come up off my knees, I'm sunk into my heels and I'm not up on my tippy toes. So it's important to have the heels kind of supporting the bottom of the body here, so that way I can push myself into my heels. Now, before we get all the way there, in this position, again, we can kind of go through that cow, camel, cat, cow position, where again, here's the arch, right? And then here's the tuck. So if you experiment with sort of those two positions, it's going to teach you the extremes. And again, what we're looking for is that tuck, that posterior tilt. So if you try that out, this is where we're trying to get you to. So you can keep the knees down, and right away, before I even pick my knees up off the floor, I already feel abs because I'm closing the distance between the bottom of my rib cage and the top of my pelvis. So between those two sort of bony areas, the rib cage and the pelvis, I'm closing that area off, which is creating tension in the core while simultaneously tucking the tailbone, right? So again, if I'm going to tuck that tailbone, I'm feeling some abs just staying on my knees, and then once I come up off the knees and sink into my heels, now I'm really posteriorly tilted. I'm getting the most out of this plank here. I'm feeling zero lower back, all abs, and I've achieved that pelvic tuck, that tucking of the tailbone. And this is basically, right, so in this planking position, I'm in a straight line, right? And that's what we're trying to be able to achieve when we're standing. When we're at the top of our squats, the top of our deadlifts, any hinging or squatting patterns, we're looking to have that straight, posture with the tailbone tucked or the pelvis tilted. So that's how we can bring some awareness to it in the prone position, on all fours, in a plank position. And if we need to build a little bit more context on that, we can just flip over. Hook lying, which is just knees bent. And same thing, we're just going to continue to build context. And the reason we're going through all these different variations is because some work better for others. Some work better than others for some people. So again, if I had to arch my back here, create that space, that is an anteriorly tilted pelvis. I'm tilting my pelvis forward, right? And then if I were to flatten my lower back, tuck the tailbone, flat low back, no space underneath there, that's a good sign that I have achieved that posterior tilt. I'm feeling some abs because I'm squishing my back into the floor. And from there, we built more context on it, okay? Now, another position we can do this in is short kneeling, tall kneeling, okay? So for a short kneeling position, whenever the femurs are in front of our pelvis, our thighs are in front of our pelvis, it allows us to kind of have a little bit more reference for where our hip is in space. The femurs in front of the pelvis kind of help tilt it back. So same things here. If I'm going to be short kneeling here, I can tilt my pelvis forward, I can tilt my pelvis back, right? Again, finding the two extremes, so that way we can find the middle. Oh, there it is. All right, cool. So from here, if you achieve it, to move it into the next step, if you can achieve that tuck in the short kneeling position, you're gonna try and keep that orientation of the pelvis, come all the way up into a tall kneeling position, and you should notice whether or not you lose that position of the hips. So from the side here, my waistband should be a good indicator of where my pelvis is in space, right? If I kind of relax, it's sort of naturally anteriorly tilted, very common. But if I sit back, you see it's in the same position. I can tuck the tailbone, keep it there, get up into a tall kneeling position, and now all of a sudden I feel more hamstrings, I feel more glutes, okay? So go ahead and practice that, and then that would take us into the standing position. So from here, now that we're still continuing to work on that pelvic tuck, if I soften the knees, it's gonna help a little bit. Here's the tuck this way, here's the tilt that way. Okay, found the two extremes. Now, since we're emphasizing the posterior tuck, the tuck of the tailbone, we're gonna get all the way here, stand up nice and tall, and see if you can maintain that pelvic position, okay? And this is gonna be very important for, again, our hinging patterns, our squatting patterns, and of course, those front plank positions, those supine positions, the dead bug exercises. Just to build it, just to show you what we're building it toward, it's going to be that hinged motion, the hinging motion, where if I keep a posteriorly tilted pelvis, I'm going to be here. Hopefully you can see the difference. It's the difference between here and here, okay? So that is the difference between feeling lower back and not feeling lower back, or feeling core, feeling glutes, feeling hamstrings, and only feeling hamstrings and maybe some lower back when we're doing these exercises. So to show you what we often see, when we kind of get into that position where we're feeling lower back, we're kind of here, right? You can see that sort of arch back. Now the lumbar spine does have a natural curvature to it, but we don't want to overdo it. Of course, over rounding it's not going to be good either. So again, it's kind of using the context of the other two exercises or the other exercises to find the extremes. What's too far forward? What's too far back? Okay, we got to be in the middle somewhere. So if I'm going to be hinging at the hips, I'm going to tuck my tailbone. I'm going to hold on to a little bit of that tuck as I go into my hinged motion, hinging pattern, and boom, there we go. Lots of glutes for me here, lots of hamstrings, and then at the top, making sure I finish with the boom, tuck, right? That's something that we often forget. We can achieve it at the top. We go through our hinge, we come back to the top, we kind of forgot, oh yeah, there's the tuck, right? The difference between here and here. Now, it feels a little bit silly sometimes, but it's just important to practice. And it, again, brings the whole exercise together. It creates a lot of core tension. It gets you more glutes and hamstrings. So for the hinge motion, again, to demonstrate what we're looking for here, hanging on to a little bit of that pelvic tilt, coming back up, finishing with that pelvic tilt at the top, making sure that we're not anteriorly tilting. So for the squatting motion, it's going to be very similar, where I'm going to try and achieve that pelvic tilt at the top. I'm going to hang on to some of that tuck. I'm going to go down. Now, if you notice, a lot of times we'll say, oh, we don't want the knees to go in front of the toes. That is a much longer discussion. But in terms of respecting the pelvic position, when we keep that posterior tuck, it is going to be a knee dominant exercise first. So we're going to tuck the tailbone here. We're going to shoot those knees forward. And then as the knees start to travel forward, I run out of space. I come back into the hips. I keep that tuck. I come up. And again, I'm in that neutral position. So to demonstrate what often happens when we don't see that, it's a very hip dominant squat. And then we come back up and we're here. Now, if you noticed, what's missing? The tuck of the tailbone, okay? The posterior pelvic tilt. Again, it takes a lot of practice to kind of be able to do it on cue, on command, and the mirrors are helpful. So you can do it with your own set of eyes on it. Again, I'm holding onto that tuck. My knees go forward. I run out of knee space to go travel forward. I sink all the way down. I keep that tuck on the way up. Boom, I'm finishing there. I don't have to find it, right? I'm not losing it and then finding it again. So hopefully that built some awareness. It's a quick rundown on the pelvic position in space, trying to get that posterior tilt, that tuck of the tailbone. Hopefully those exercises and drills bring some context toward when you do a major pattern like a hinge or a squat. Hopefully that was helpful. Try it out and have a good day. Thanks.